Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to be able to join you this afternoon for a conversation with these two dynamic, accomplished leaders. This conversation is in collaboration between United Way for Southeastern Michigan and United Way Worldwide, two organizations committed to driving equitable change in communities. Whether you're tuning in as part of recognition of Black History Month, or if you're just getting a jump on Women's History Month, or even if you're just here for inspiration, motivation that these two leaders will share, we are thrilled to have you here with us. Before I welcome today's rock stars, let me share a little bit about myself. My name is Alicia January. I grew up with strong Black women in my corner. My grandmother, my great-grandmother, my mom, and my aunts all played a major role in my upbringing. Because of them, I knew I could do anything no matter what the world tried to throw my way. I received my bachelor's and master's degree from the Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. Going to a Southern HBCU where the majority of my family attended school, including my parents, was the best decision I ever made. A memory I will never forget is walking on campus for the first time and seeing so many Black people from all over the world. I felt seen for the very first time. It was glorious, everyone there for the same reason, to get an education, connect, and grow for the culture. It was beautiful. Currently, I live in Baltimore, Maryland, working for Charles Street Development as the Marketing and Engagement Manager. I've worked with United Way since 2018 as both a global brand ambassador and with United Way Central Maryland in the Baltimore area. I'm excited to have this conversation this morning with Ms. Williams and Dr. Hudson. I'm delighted to introduce both of you today. While I share your basic bios, let's get to know you a little bit more. So Ms. Williams, what should we know about you?
I think the most important thing to know about me is that, one, I'm a Christian. I love the Lord. Two, my faith defines my identity and who I am as a person who believes in purpose. And it's that knowledge of being a purpose-driven individual that propels me to do the things that I do. And primarily, it's to serve others, to make sure that I can contribute in some way to other people's lives such that they have the ability to prosper, to thrive, to have access to all of the things that give them purpose in life and allow them to be all that they were created to be.
That's awesome. Finding your purpose is the ultimate goal, I think, for everyone. Dr. Hudson, what about you?
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, for having us here today. I think the thing I want people to know is that at the end of the day, I love the idea of service. I think that leadership is an incredible journey. And if you remove all the titles, the things that people remember is really how you treat them, how you make them feel. And some of my best teachers were actually my students. And so, every experience that I've had, I've been able to grow and develop through my faith. Strengthen bonds with family and friends, and also just knowing that this is all part of a journey that really has us on a higher purpose and really answering a higher call. So whether I was in education or in a nonprofit like I am now, it's just really the opportunity just to serve and to be able to work with people, empowering people, to be able to have the type of life that everyone dreams of and everyone deserves.
I love that. So we're going to get into our first question, and I'm super excited to hear the answers to this. You're both serving as the first Black female CEOs of your respective organization, and that's such a significant milestone, and I am so proud of both of you. Can you share a bit about your journey to get there, and was there someone or something that really inspired you towards success?
I'll start by saying that I had excellent role models in my parents. My parents in the 1960s were active in the civil rights movement. They then made a courageous choice to join the military. My dad became a Navy chaplain, and we moved from South Carolina in an environment that was primarily African American to San Diego, which was a mixed population. That decision of my parents to move us from the East Coast to the West in the 60s really are what contributed to me being what I consider a global citizen. And having mentors, people that are willing to take you outside of your knowledge base and your current experience and to cast vision and show possibility is what really propelled me to be where I am today. My parents taught me about being bold. They taught me about being courageous. They taught me about the fact that just because someone says no to you, no is just a word. Don't affix any emotion to it. Don't let it deflate you. Don't let it be the last straw and you just turn around and not go and try it again. And so because of that, it has allowed me to be to lean into opportunities that were new, and always being the one to break not just a glass ceiling, but the concrete barrier that really exists for African American women.
Thank you. Dr. Hudson, was there someone or something that helped you towards your success?
Absolutely. My family was definitely my anchor. I think of both of my grandmothers, and my maternal grandmother was one of 12. She was the first in her family to go to college, and she attended WSSU, Winston-Salem State University, but she also earned her master's from Columbia University in 1947.
Wow.
And we learned a lot about segregation scholarships, the conditions and the reasons why she had to attend Columbia, because she was not admitted into Winston-Salem, or she couldn't go to North Carolina State, excuse me, to get her master's. And so I just learned so much from her about resilience and determination. She was a teacher. So she's the reason why I initially went into teaching. And she surrounded us with so many people from all walks of life and really taught us that it doesn't matter what anyone's title is or level of education. At the end of the day, you really have to look at a person's character. That's what defines them, not their title. And my paternal grandmother had a very different situation. Her mother was actually killed in a car accident, and it rocked their family. And she had my father when she was 15, and she opened her own hair salon. She was a cosmetologist and an entrepreneur, and taught us so much, again, about grit and resilience. And no matter what hardships come your way, with family, with faith and determination, you can really do anything and be anything you want to be. So education was enforced in our family. Both of my parents are post-baccalaureate degrees. And from day one, my dad used to always say, your only job is to go to school. And they meant that too. And so all along, the way, my sister is a doctor. She's a neonatologist down in Jackson, Mississippi. And my brother is actually finishing he just earned his doctorate in theology. And, for me, being the first Black female superintendent and the youngest in Milwaukee Public Schools, and then coming here to run the United Way with the same demographic, it was really expected just from day one. And I remember my mother would say, because they weren't able to travel to come see a lot of the things that happened in Milwaukee. And my mother would say, I didn't need to see any of these things. This is what was destined from you from day one. And, we had this vision for you, and it was all expected. So that's what really carries me. And so there are lots of firsts, but it's really the work that speaks for you.
Can I just jump in for 1 second and say, here we are in 2022.
I know.
And isn't it amazing that we're recounting these stories and journeys? You would think by now we shouldn't still be the first or the only. So it just signals that there's still so much work to do. And the other thread that I'm hearing from both of you is how important education is. And that is a tool that allows a person to really expand their horizons. So thank you both for sharing your stories.
I was feeling so happy hearing both of you because I resonated with both of your stories. I moved around a lot when I was younger, and it really actually helped me a lot with connecting with people in all types of people, which was amazing. And then, yeah, education. I was really close with my grandmother and my great grandma. And so seeing how they navigated through Jackson really, really taught me, to just keep going. So I just loved hearing your stories.
Can I just say, I got to talk about my maternal grandmother too.
Yes.
So she was born in 1898, graduated from college, and she ran the one-room schoolhouse in Plum Branch, South Carolina. And then my mom growing up at like 15 was driving the yellow school bus through all the country roads to go pick up all the kids so they could come to school. It's just, that's our legacy, and it's a recent legacy for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's beautiful. So Dr. Hudson, you served on the search committee for United Way Worldwide's new CEO in 2021, the committee that eventually chose Angela as its new leader. How did you approach that process, and what did you bring to the table?
So at that time, I'd been in the United Way network as a CEO for 3 years, but my history with United Way actually started long before that. And I remember my father was actually an executive champion when he was an administrator at the hospital he was working in Virginia. And so growing up, I knew a lot about United Way, and I was a volunteer with United Way when I was a superintendent prior to coming to this role. So I had in my mind what United Way could be, what it needs to be, especially in the times that we find ourselves in. And coming to the table as a steering committee member, I'd also chaired a national organization, the Council of the Great City Schools, and it's a lobbying agency, a policymaking agency for 70 of the largest urban school districts in the country. So having a good idea of what it takes to run a national organization, the types of knowledge base that you need to have, and the experience that's really necessary when you're advocating for all, literally. Angela is advocating for every person in the entire world. And it takes a very specific skill set and a worldview. And I felt that I was bringing that experience and also the vision for what was possible to that steering committee. And I have to say, I think we did an excellent job. And not just, bragging, but I think just she's been with us for 100 days and already we can feel the change. And again, you've heard her background and the legacy that she brings. All of that came through in the conversations that we had with her. But the first thing that everyone says is that she was a minister. And we need at this time someone who listens and someone who heals.
Thank you for your vote in my favor. I love it. I'm glad to be here.
That's amazing. When it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we know that representative leadership is not enough. Dr. Hudson, United Way for Southeastern Michigan was named the best managed nonprofit by Crain's Business Detroit in 2020, an honor that focused both on your fiscal responsibilities and stewardship, but also largely on your organization's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. How and why did DEI, beyond representation and towards concrete action?
So, we're in a time where diversity, equity, and inclusion have become somewhat of a buzzword. And I think all of us were shaken to our core in 2020. But actually, my United Way had approved a strategic plan that was centered on equity and inclusion, being a people-first organization, being collaborative, and being innovative. Those are our core values. And that was actually approved March 11th, 2020, which happens to be the same day that our governor declared a state of emergency due to the pandemic. And this was not something that I decided in isolation. These values were formed by the staff. We're fortunate we have a very diverse staff, and also our board. And we were very committed to living. You hear people say live united all of the time when they talk about United Way. Our organization is built to be able to bring people together from different points of view, different lived experiences, all in the name of serving others who need help. And so we knew right away we had had to begin with our governance, everything from the trainings that we received, but also the diversity of our board, and what were the topics that we were covering. When we talk about our data, are we actually digging into the core, the root cause issues that are causing disparities that we're seeing in terms of race, in terms of geography in our region, which is the Detroit metro area. I also think our staff played a significant, I know our staff played a significant role. This was not a top-down mandate in our organization. I mean, this was all hands on deck. I had a team of millennials and Gen Zers who actually took the lead in helping to form a number of our what are now core programs in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion internally, and that was necessary. These issues never become concreted and built into an organization when it's just a current leader that is initiating them. You really have to have the staff, you have to have the people that we serve become a part of it. So it's not optional. This is our way of doing business. Equity is at the center of all of our conversations. It is rooted in our policies. You know, we've actually made changes to a number of our policies and procedures to better reflect the needs of our population, the needs of our staff, and also just where we need to go. You know, Angela said it best. It's 2022. And the fact that we're still talking about first and that age is still a big deal when we're talking about people holding leadership positions is unfortunate. We have to get more comfortable talking about race and how we actually create policies and procedures and practices where it is not an exception, where excellence is not an exception, it's expected, and we're testing our assumptions every day. So for us, we had to start with governance, looking at policy and procedures, change the way that we were talking about our data, and then really putting meaning to the words "live united" as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Wow. Angela, can you share more about United Way's organizational commitment to DEI?
Yes, I'm just excited that I joined an organization that publicly is committed to DE&I work and did the work to support our local United Ways, including creating a toolkit, including creating an equity framework, and even defining what does it look like, because this work is a journey and very unique by community and by individual. And so how can organizations or individuals engage in this type of work? They can do so through looking, as Darienne said, looking at your data, and then from that data, learning what opportunities there are. It could include, for United Way organizations, providing grants in their local communities to support this work with partner organizations. This could show up in the way of looking at staff and staff engagement and really thinking about, when you talk about the equity lens and how we define equity, which is intentional inclusion of everyone, then that's the baseline. If we start there and then are more conscientious about word choices, conscientious about who has a seat at the table, how we engage others, then that's a part of this continuum of inclusion. And so I'm really proud of the way United Way Worldwide has leaned into this. And I'm also very proud in the way that our local United Ways have leaned into this and have done some creative things. And every time I talk to local CEOs, I learn even more about what they're doing to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in their local communities.
And if I could just add one other thing, just as Angela was talking, you know, you're going to hear from a number of United Ways, ours included, about a 21-day equity challenge.
Yes.
And it really is testing every assumption we ever had about our local regions and looking at things like environmental justice, as well as gender equity, and looking at ableism and just a number of different topics that we don't necessarily cover. And I'm proud that we have all signed up for the challenge, but it is also fraught with tension. And it's easy to stand here today and smile and tell you that we're doing all of these great things. We, gave out $600,000 worth of grants to BIPOC-led organizations, but it is fraught with tension. There are many people who are struggling with these pivots that we are making. And so I think keeping these conversations open, having a number of community leaders, we have a task force of 20 community leaders who are helping us do this work, is so important because this pivot is not easy for everyone. And we're trying to bring communities along with us to talk about these difficult systems and inequities that exist. But I had to just say that this is really all hands on deck. Angela is leading the world around this concept of equity, and all of us at Local United Ways are participating in these different challenges throughout the year to try to bring others along with us. But if you're listening to this, and that means that you signed up and you're with us, we do need your help. There are a lot of people who just aren't necessarily ready, who are still struggling with this concept. And it really is going to take all of us to be able to get our communities where we need them to really understand why equity and inclusion matter.
You know what? I just want to build on that even a little bit more because, as you said, this conversation requires crucial conversations, and you use the word tension. Not everybody is comfortable talking about things like this, but what I would say to everybody, you must get outside of yourself and put yourself in someone else's shoes, number one. Number two, we have to all value other people's experiences. Your experiences are not like mine, but you can't devalue my experience, and I can't devalue yours. And I go back to this whole notion of equity. And that means that everyone has the seat at the table. And so when you're sitting at a table, whether it's the dinner table, whether it's a corporate board table, whether it's an organizational table, whatever that table is, when you look around, if there is no difference or diversity, then that should raise the question, why not? And what can we do to shift that? And then there's this quote that I always like saying, that iron sharpens iron. And that is because of our individual backgrounds and experiences, we bring to the table a point of view and experience that then challenges the status quo. And in that challenge and in that give and take and in those crucial conversations, I think we get to a better outcome. So that's why I think it's so critically important for us to do this work.
Absolutely. I totally understand feeling uncomfortable in situations and understanding that, we do have to talk more, because that's the only way you do get to learn about everyone else that's at that table. Because like you said, the assumptions, no, just because they might look a certain way doesn't mean a certain thing. They haven't had the same struggles or different struggles. So yes, having those conversations, pushing through is super important, and it has to happen in the workplace too.
Yes.
Awesome. So programs and fundings are important to changing the narrative for Black and Brown youth. But also, I think back to the moments that most influenced my life and the decisions that I made as a Black woman and how I was guided by my family. Who inspired and guided you towards the woman that you are today? I'll start with Dr. Hudson, actually.
So as I had mentioned earlier, I talked about the role that my grandmothers played and my parents, but the one person I have not had a chance to talk about is my sister. Her name is Kara, and we are about 3.5 years apart. And because of my sister, I don't ever remember learning how to read. Just from day one, my sister was reading books to me. She taught me how to do math. My sister made sure, I was able to hang out with her friends, and that meant that I had to have a certain vocabulary. I had to conduct myself a certain type of way. And she, she was a musician. She still is a musician. So I became a musician. She was in the marching band. I joined the marching band. And she's just someone who has always been such an incredible role model. When God designed Big Sisters, he had Kara in mind. And my sister is just the epitome of resilience and determination, just to see the way that she treats her patients, their newborns who are ill, and with so much passion and so much love. And, we had an agreement when we were young, and she would say, well, because at that time she wanted to be an obstetrician. So she would say, well, I'll deliver them and then you can teach them. And that was the agreement that we had. And so just over the years and just seeing all of the trials and triumphs that she's experienced just really pushed me to want to be the greatest leader that I can be. But my sister is also incredibly humble. I mean, most people wouldn't even know the types of things that she's accomplished in meeting her, because she's so approachable. She's down to earth. She's kind. She bakes. She sews. She does everything. I mean, she's amazing. Now, I don't do those things. Those lessons didn't get past.
Well, we'll have to meet your sister now.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to meet Kara. And it is a joke that I'm not the family cook. But I can run your kitchen for you, but I can't. Don't ask me to cook anything. But just she really is the one that I have to say has just inspired me throughout. I've had all types of mentors, but my sister is just really remarkable. And because of her, I am.
That's so special. I want to meet her too.
Yeah, tell Kara we're coming to Jackson.
I will.
And then Angela, what moments in your history as a Black youth inspired you?
So just like Darienne, the same thing. Having a mom that really poured into me, especially with my dad being in the Navy on ships. He was deployed a lot, and she dug in to make sure that my sister and brother and I had the best in terms of education. She was the parent that showed up at school. She was the parent that made sure that we had all the extracurricular activities. She never took no for answer. She pushed us to stand up for ourselves, be our own advocates. But then also, I was an avid reader, and I used to read tons and tons of books. And so the stories, like a Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, even though I didn't know them personally, I was inspired by their stories. I would read the literary authors and what they would talk about and their experiences and their biographies, and then I go back to the stories of not only my grandmother, who I told you about, being born in 1898 and being this one-room school teacher, but also hearing the story of my great-grandmother, that when the Klan showed up at the doorstep to take my grandfather, she had the shotgun and said, "You will not come in this house," and stared them down, talked them down, and they went away. So, it's just hearing the stories of others and learning about their experience and saying, "Me too, I can do this," is really what has carried me through. And I think that's for the three of us today, that as others hear our stories, they will be encouraged and they will know that I can be like them and I can achieve. And then the other thing that I think is important, that we're talking about, like what's inspired us, but what I have now is the commitment to the next generations down. So I have put myself in a position now to be that mentor and to be that guide to young women. And I'm talking about women in their 30s, their 20s, and kids, young girls that are elementary school, junior high school. And so having those connections, it's that continuum of really that encouragement and that legacy.
I love that. And, as people are watching this, the one thing I always think of, because people say, well, how did you get there? And, how do you do these things? And I'm sure people are picked up. I'm a little silly too, with all the titles. I like to laugh, but anyone can do this. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a people who've inspired them. So, I always just want to encourage anyone who's listening. I mean, you've heard it right here. Take time to think about your journey, share it with others, ask people about their journeys and what's inspired them. I mean, this is how we create the narrative and the counter narrative to
Yes,
what is possible. So
that's right.
I'm definitely inspired listening. I wish I could have met your great grandmother and just trying to stay still in my seat, just thinking about what's possible and what all of us can do for the generations that are coming behind us.
Yes.
I hope that I actually had a conversation with a friend about, I wish in elementary school I had known about nonprofits and other ways that you can, get involved in things, because we learn about the volunteer part in school, but you don't understand that that's actually something that you can do and take it to a whole nother level. And knowing about United Way and that you actually can work there or you can actually work and do something to better your community. So I think it's beautiful that, now young women especially will be able to see you too and know that, oh my gosh, that's something I can do. Okay, let me figure out how I'm going to do that.
That's
So,
right.
yeah. Angela, you lead an organization that is working towards equitable outcomes for youth in cities and towns across the country. What do you see as the biggest challenge to racial equity in America, and what gives you hope?
I think the biggest challenge is what we were talking about earlier, where people want to shy away from the conversation, or they say that doesn't really apply in our community. And so when you shut down conversation, then you can't have that meaningful dialogue that breaks down barriers. You miss the opportunity to have that coming together. And so what I see then on the converse side of that is the opportunity for our local United Way leaders to not give up on those conversations. Um, I want to just tell you a quick story, if I could, just to model behavior that tears down barriers, and it's a lesson I learned from my dad. My dad was the fifth, actually, Black chaplain in the history of the Navy. And so one of his duty stations was in Okinawa. And the base commander said he did not want a Black chaplain to be assigned to the base. Well, my dad still had his orders and showed up. And my dad knew that his commander did not want to engage him, did not want his presence there. But what my dad did was every morning he'd get 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one for that commander. And every morning he'd stop by and say, "Hey, good morning. Hope you have a wonderful day," and just drop that coffee off. Eventually, by the time my dad's tenure was over on that base, he and that base commander were best buddies. And that base commander relied on my dad. And what that says is that no matter how difficult it may be to pierce that veil, to have that conversation, to deal with someone who's in shutdown or denial mode, that you just have to still keep chipping away, and you have to build relationship, and you do it in very different ways. And so creativity is the order of the day. And I am thankful that our local United Way leaders and our United Way leaders, worldwide staff, are doing that and looking at creative ways in which to further this effort.
That's awesome. I love the fact of thinking of something so simple as, okay, we both like coffee, so I'm going to bring this coffee every day to this person. I run a group here in Baltimore where I bring women together from all walks of life, and I just want them to know that we can build community here together, even if we have, you might live in different parts of Baltimore or whatever. And I knew that we all like girl talk, no matter what. You like that. And then I knew that we all love brunch. So I knew that was a way of getting everyone together, that they've never met each other. They look completely different. Ages are different. And that's how we start the conversation. And now, tapping into the race conversation is something that is more comfortable because you have shared stories with one another about just your life. So I knew just finding that one thing that they would definitely have in common would work. So that story definitely hits home for me.
Yes.
Okay, so Darienne, you talked a little bit about being a teacher and being in the education world before coming to United Way. Um, there are growing calls for reform in education. If you had a magic wand, what would you change about the education system today or the atmosphere for our youth?
That's a very tough question because, of course, it's not that simple, but I will do my best. Answer in the spirit of the question in terms of thinking about a magic wand, or if there was a easier way to resolve some of the issues. The school that I taught in was actually in Detroit. I started teaching here after I earned my master's from the University of Michigan. And in the 4 years that I was here, I'd been laid off several times. That time, the district was losing 10,000 students annually. My school eventually closed a few years after I left. And just seeing the intersection of industry, of education, and also social services and what happens to communities when they erode is what really led me to be a superintendent. So when I think about what schools need, and of course I'm biased, I'm very partial to urban schools and rural schools because we have very similar issues. They just manifest themselves in different ways. I think state funding formulas desperately need reform. They are largely built on local tax bases. And of course, cities that bring in and counties that bring in more tax dollars have more funding available for their schools. And the same thing, whether it's homestead taxes, things of that nature. And just seeing what has been allowed to happen in a lot of our urban centers, in my opinion, is criminal. And so it's not just more money, it's actually changing the formulas that provide funding to our schools, I think is really requires more thought and a different look. And it's all over the country. There's so much strife right now around how education is funding, but I think that's critical. If I had a magic wand, I would want every school to be a community school. When I was a teacher, we were a Comer school. So I'm dating myself a little bit. This was 20 years ago. But when I was superintendent, I had 8 community schools, excuse me. And now here at United Way, we've actually launched 5 community schools in 4 districts here. And it's the idea that schools are the anchor. They're the center of the neighborhood, the lighthouse of the community. And all of the wraparound services are built to support children and families. So these schools have in-house clinics. They have labs that are open for English as second language classes, workforce development classes for parents. They're equipped with, laundry facilities and all of the things that families need, that children need to be successful. I'm also a huge proponent of the Strive Network. This is a collective impact. I see head nodding. So this is a collective impact approach. It's focused on, the cradle to career strategy. So as soon as young people or as soon as children are born, all the way through graduation and on to some type of a 2-year or 4-year institution, and bringing together businesses, nonprofits, community centers, and schools, all in the service of children and families. And you see it all over the country, big cities, small cities. But I think if every city had this type of an infrastructure, we could get so much more done for our children. And the last thing I would just say is we have to bring joy back into the learning environment. I was a music kid. I played the clarinet. I played the bass clarinet. I was in the color guard. I used to dance, played softball, all of these wonderful things. And, my husband and I talk all of the time. He's actually from Detroit, and he talks about being in the police athletic league and playing hockey and playing baseball and all these different things. And those are usually the first things to go in education. We take out the arts, we take out music. So I think we have to do so much more to bring that back into the schools. So, children are well-rounded. I look at my mother, she would kill me if I said this. So what else?
Don't say it.
Don't say it.
Tired. My mother's retired. She still is the treasurer for the church. She plays the piano. She still plays the clarinet. She sings, and she will talk all of the time about that upbringing in music. Her parents were singers, and so I just think those are some of the things I'd like to see in education. And last but not least is we have to do more to appreciate our educators.
Yes.
Teachers, we need to do better about salaries that we are giving them. And, my fellow superintendents that are out there fighting the good fight, it has been devastating to see the number of superintendents who are leaving the position. And I know I was one of them that left pre-COVID, but we have to do more to protect our leaders, to encourage them, to keep them in these roles and depoliticize education and get focused on what matters most, which is the children. I'm
That's
done.
like a stump speech. Amen.
Absolutely. I felt every bit of that.
Yes.
I was a teacher when I first left
Oh,
special education and grew up with everyone. My mom, her twin, my dad, they're teachers as well. So yeah, I understand. So we talked about how representation is not enough, but what do you see as the impact of visible Black female leaders in nonprofit, in the corporate sector as well, in education and politics on Black and Brown youth? So we'll start with you, Angela.
I think and for me, as I said, as a child, seeing others who are doing these great things, again, it just casts vision, like Barbara Jordan. I remember reading about her, seeing her on TV. I remember Shirley Chisholm when she was going to run for president, and just seeing Black females in the media, in news stories, reading about them, seeing them in church, and in just various forum, really cast vision and said to me, you can be and do whatever you want to. And that's what I love now about us being in the nonprofit sector. As leaders in the nonprofit sector, Darienne and I had the opportunity also to create programming and to shape programming given our unique lenses and experiences. And so again, when we talk about DE&I, it's not a standalone thing. It should be woven into everything, every aspect of what we do. And so as nonprofit sector leaders, we're then able to infuse it in our programming such that how we touch youth in local communities has that component to it. But it's also just being out and about, talking to people, connecting, building relationships. And the work is never done. I will just say the work that we all do in showing up is never done. And it's a 24/7, 365-day a year responsibility. And I say that it's our responsibility to continue to reach to the generations that are coming behind us. We don't have a choice. And at the same time, we're I was going to use the word strapped, and maybe that's not a good word, but we are, and maybe encumbered is not a good word, but we have the responsibility still to continue to push, even now. And as I said at the outset, 2022, there are still not enough of us. There's still at the tables not enough diversity. And we've got to continue to do things like we're doing now, having these frank conversations, allowing people to just eavesdrop on what we're saying and being free enough to say what we feel and not fear retribution, because we know we're living in a cancel culture, but this is our reality and no one can take that away from us.
No. So Darienne, how do you think having, Black females in these types of positions are important for Black and Brown youth?
Well, actually, I think they're important for all youth to be able to see. And, we're in a stage now, the children that are coming up, their vice president is a South Asian African-American woman. That's been unheard of, right? She's the first. And the same way that many of our youth now have grown up, they knew President Obama. It was not an anomaly to see Black excellence in leadership. I was in Virginia when Doug Wilder became the first Black governor there in the early 90s. And I remember going to Spelman College, and Johnetta Cole was my first college president. And she was the first African-American woman at that time, even at Spelman College, to be the president. So, we can all go back and look at moments where we saw a Black woman, a Black man as a leader and then it was normalized.
Mhm.
And so I think we have to now do our part to make sure that people understand this could be, should be the norm.
Mhm.
And, I look at Rosalind Brewer, she's from Detroit, and we are all just so inspired by seeing her ascend now to being the CEO of Walgreens, at Walgreens. And again, I want everyone to see that and say, I know what's possible. I also want people to be able to learn from different styles of leadership.
Yes.
I'm a storyteller. I believe in collaboration. I also have very high expectations. And these are things that everyone should believe in, and different skills that they should have. Not just because I'm a Black woman, but because these are traits that leaders should have. And so, I'm hoping as there are more and more examples, I am definitely anticipating the appointment of the next Supreme Court justice. I probably shouldn't have said that, but I'm just going to say it. So, it's because it's been discussed, but I do want to get to that place where it is a norm, where it's expected to see Black women in positions of leadership. And, people understand that it's a part of life. And there's so much that you can learn from these leaders. So I would say it isn't just Black and brown youth. I want all youth to understand that leaders of all different types of experiences can teach you something, can show you something that perhaps that you didn't know. And I think one of my most favorite moments after Vice President Harris was voted into office, I was on Facebook and looking at some of the comments and friends from all different walks of life. Again, I have lived a lot of places, so I have a lot of different friends. And this was actually one of my Caucasian friends, and she was just talking about the conversations that she was having with her daughters. And her daughters were saying, Mommy, oh my goodness, I want to be just like her when I grow up. And it was just beautiful, it was this whole dialogue. And it wasn't about, I want to be this Black person.
Right.
It was just about seeing someone who inspired them, that made them want to be the next vice president. So I think seeing us is important for people from all walks of life and of all races.
Yes. Men and women too. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that the positives with, for example, social media is that you can blast these things out more. So someone who lives, I don't know, 5,000 miles away can still see this, and they might not have that in where they live, but to be able to know that, oh no, this is actually happening. I do see these women moving up and accomplishing the things that they want to see. So it's awesome in that way, because I can just imagine whatever 50 years ago, if it wasn't like in your bubble, it just seemed like it was impossible. Whereas now you have access to see those things, and obviously wanting to make sure that everyone has that access. I worked in a rural school, so I knew like they didn't all have computers at home, whatever, but at least now there is more access. So pushing that information out to be easily found is super important. So we're really wrapping up. I want to make sure that if you have any final thoughts, please, this is the moment to do it. This was just such a wonderful day.
Well, I just want to first thank Dr. Hudson for inviting me and to join this conversation in her platform. And Alicia, I just want to say thank you for being the younger woman in this group of three, and all that you do in facilitating so wonderfully our discussion. I just think that, again, we are at a crossroads in history. And this is an important moment that we must seize. We must continue to have these conversations. We must continue to celebrate the wins in diversity and equity and inclusion. And I just want to say that I will never stop having these conversations. So thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Angela. I think, the push, the charge that we want everyone to leave with today. And you've heard three very different life experiences and different voices, but the conversations must continue. These are difficult times. You heard me stop myself a few times and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But we have to push. We have to force these conversations, because quite frankly, the youth who are watching, they're counting on it.
Yeah.
And this is a critical time in our country, and definitely locally. There's a lot of change that's happening here in Metro Detroit, and so I'm just excited that I was able to be a part of this, and just wonderful to speak with you, Angela, and you, Alicia, and just want anyone who's watching today, grab two friends, share your stories, create
Yes.
a new narrative,
Yes.
talk about what's possible, and then just go after and do it, and bring people along with you, because that is the essence of what it means to live united.
Yeah.
And those are the principles that we live by every day. So just thank you all for being here with us today. And I'm very hopeful and inspired about what the future holds for all of us.
Thank you both so much for your time today, for sharing your stories, and for all you're doing to build stronger, more equitable communities. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Remember to learn more about United Way for Southeastern Michigan. Please go to unitedwaysem.org. And for more information about United Way in general, including to connect with your local United Way, go to unitedway.org. Have a wonderful day.